Steppe is the richest ecosystem of Ukraine in regards to a biodiversity of species. Every natural ecosystem is unique and important because it takes part in forming specific environment and conditions where mankind can exist. Steppe is also involved in this global process. Steppe gave birth to black soils or chernozems. Nowadays, they feed millions of people in the world. Steppe participates in support of proper oxygen and carbon dioxide balance of atmosphere. It is well known that carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas of the Earth, and its excessive concentration provokes global heating. Thus, steppes play a very important role in climate forming. Despite wide open spaces and varied relief, steppe vegetation created thick grass sod, which completely protected soils against erosion. That is why same climate aridity couldn't hamper steppes in creating a hydrologic regime that is appropriate for human existence. The branched network of rivers and underground waters were formed here. Steppe has created a wide diversity of flora and fauna species. They have provided pollination, stable population balance, transformation plant residues into humus. Today, steppe retains highly valued genetic resources, and they are the basis for development of selection, pharmaceutics and other high-tech industries. Fescue feather grass steppes are especially distinguished by their biodiversity richness and colorfulness. Grassland patches of this type remained along Kazennyi Torets riversides, near Novoekonomichny village in Pokrovsk district of Donetsk region. Old unofficial name of the village is Karakova. It originates from the name of Greek village Karakova in Crimea. The Greeks migrated there in 18th century, but they left these lands soon. However, the name of locality has remained. The last islands of Karakova steppes have remained too. Their history is an example of life and death of steppes that is typical for many other steppe regions of Ukraine and Europe. Biological and geological landscape elements, time and space encounter in Karakova steppes. Look at this sandstone. It is the incarnation of the past into the present. These rocks were formed tens million years ago. However, even today they are the component of steppe landscape and they continue to influence on environment conditions for flora and fauna. There are more than 200 plant species in Karakova steppes. The plant world is one of the key factors of soil and climate forming, but besides that, each plant species has a range of individual specific properties. This unnoticeable plant is Equisetum. It is a descendant of old representatives of horsetail family, which together with ferns and club mosses formed coal deposits here more than 300 million years ago. Wild bunch grasses are indispensable component of steppe plant cover. Bromopsis inermis is a famous fodder plant which is eaten by wild animals as well as domestic ones. This is Agropyrum pectiniforme. It can exist successfully in poor and stony grounds. Steppe lessingiana is a species listed in Red Data Book of Ukraine. It is a real symbol of all the steppes. This is Allium rotundum. It is a medical plant with phytoncide properties. In ancient times, it was applied as a coloring matter for textile. Some early flowering plants of Karakova steppes have also been listed in Red Data Book of Ukraine. For example, Ornithogalum boschianum. Fabaceae is a widespread plant family in Karakova steppes. All its representatives are phytomeliorative plants. In other words, they improve soil fertility. Of course, they have other properties too. It is Astragalus onobrichis, a high productive honey plant with excellent fodder properties. Coronilla varia is a honey plant. It is also a medical and at the same time a poisonous species with hemostatic and diuretic properties. Vicia graca is a large and highly nutritious plant. Its top part is eaten by mammals of large and medium size. The species is also an ample honey plant, which supports a great diversity of pollinators. Producing a lot of seeds, the plant becomes an important fodder resource for another group of animals, for birds and rodents. Medicagora manica has a long period of flowering that lasts until August, therefore it is one of the most stable honey plants. In addition, it can reduce salt concentration in soils. This fluffy plant is Trifolium arvense. It is adapted to growing in dry conditions and the poor soils of slopes. Definitely, Lamiaceae family is the face of Karakova steppes. The representatives of the family make the main contribution into color diversity of local grasslands, painting them in blue, violet and pink dyes. It is Salvia nutans, an abundant honey and essential oil plant. Salvia verticillata has similar properties. The typical widespread species of Lamiaceae family in local grasslands is Salvia nemorosa. Salvia aethiopic is also an essential oil plant. In addition, its large stem serves for nesting of small wild bees, the most efficient pollinators of plants. Phlomis pungens is an ample honey plant. It has some properties for curing of bronchitis and pneumonia, but modern medical science has not studied it enough yet. Phlomis tuberosa contains essential oil and tannins. It has hemostatic and antiphlogistic effect. Many species of other families are also very beautiful and have important properties. This grand and colorful plant is Verbascum lichnitis. It is one of the most productive honey plants in the steppe. People have been applying linum in cloth production for a long time. It is clear that wild linum species are not characterized by optimal textile properties, but they can be used for the selection of cultivated varieties for improvement of their biological features. It is impossible to imagine steppe paints without representatives of Boraginaceae family. One of them is Echium vulgare. It is a real king of honey plants, covered with the blue flowers from toe to crown. In addition, it has a long period of flowering. Echium vulgare is also an essential oil and tinctorial plant. Thymus marshallianus is one of the most famous essential oil grassland plants used from the earliest times. It is a component of some spices. Prunus tenella from Rosaceae family is a very beautiful shrub listed into the Red Data Book of Donetsk region. It is one of the earliest high productive honey plants. Its large-scale flowering begins at the end of April. Cotinus togigria grows on the steppe plots and in the forest shelter belts. It is an artificially planted bush originated from Crimea. At the end of summer and in autumn, steppe seems dry, but it is a false impression. The steppe blooms in any season except winter. Merely there comes a time when other species begin their flowering. Obviously, grassland colors in September don't look so vivid like in May. However, flowering of plants in dry autumn seems like a miracle. Eryngium campestre becomes important feeding resource for insects in this period. Despite dry weather, equisetum remains green. Dry weather is a wonderful opportunity for limonium to show all its beauty. Galatella linoceris is a drought-resistant plant that grows well in soils with high concentration of calcium. Speaking about the animal world of Karakova steppes, it is clear that the richest part of their biodiversity is entomological fauna, represented by hundreds of insect species. Insects are one of the most important components of steppe ecosystem. As an illustrative example of this fact can be shown wild bees, like this andrena. The domestic honeybee is very active in honey gathering, but its pollination efficiency is low as compared with some other pollinators. The main work in pollination is fulfilled by little wild bees and bumblebees. For example, a honeybee can produce 0.02 grams of alfalfa seeds per day, but the wild bee Melita produces 11.6 grams of seeds, that is in 580 times more. Tillage of soil and burning out of dry vegetation lead to gradual extinction of these insects. Virgin and stony lands are the last territories where these species can reproduce. Bird fauna is far from richness that was here before intensive economic activity. However, it still astonishes people by its diversity. Look at this bird. It is Saxicola rubicola. Galerida cristata is a typical steppe bird singing its song in summer sky. Cardielis cannabina examines a plant thoroughly, trying to find seeds. Motacilla flava is a small bird. Hay harvesting is a fine opportunity for it to find insects. Merops apiaster is one of the most beautiful birds in Ukraine. Its trivial name is a bee-eater because it feeds on bees, wasps, bumblebees. Corvus corax has a black single-tone coloration, but how ravens fly gracefully. Falca tinunculus stops its rapid flying and suddenly hovers at the height. Buteo buteo is one of the largest predatory birds which more or less frequently occurs in Karakova steppes. Nowadays, the population of Phasianus colchicus increases. However, this species is artificially introduced in the local ecosystem by hunting industry. It influences negatively on some aboriginal bird species, occupying their ecological niche. Large-scale transformation of landscape, first of all because intensive agriculture, has inflicted heavy losses on the animal world of Ukrainian steppe zone as well as Karakova steppes. Big animals, especially hoofed mammals, have become general victims of habitat disappearance. The wild horse tapir, Equus ferus, died off forever. The grassland antelope Saigata tarica disappeared in 19th century. Wild hoofed animals improved grass canopy, preventing from excessive accumulation of plant residues in it. Steppe suffers from their absence, that leads to its overgrowing with alien shrub and tree species. Today, only domestic animals are in direct reminiscence of former grassland glory. That is why mammals of medium and small size predominate in local grasslands, and Marmota bobak is one of them. This species has no any conservation status in Ukraine, but herewith it doesn't often occurs in Donetsk region. Steppe subspecies of wolf disappeared from local grasslands a long time ago. Now the biggest predatory mammal is the fox, Vulpes vulpes. The steppe zone covers 40% of Ukraine, but real steppe area is only about 3% of country territory. It means that area of grassland is very small, even in the steppe zone. Therefore, it is not surprising that 30% of Red Data Book species of Ukraine are steppe species. Unfortunately, people often perceive steppe as a wasteland that should be filled with something like crops, industrial enterprises, buildings or forests, so that the steppe couldn't remain as it is. False opinion, asserting that land must not stay without human activity, is probably one of fundamental causes which results in global environmental crisis. Most people have never thought that lands covered with wild natural ecosystems form an environment where human society can live. Karakova steppes are a reflection of global environment problems, and the first and most important of them is deficiency of wilderness itself. The main factor of wildlife destruction in the world as well as in the described locality is agriculture, especially arable farming, or speaking more correctly, its huge scale. According to estimates of scientists, the rate of arable lands should not be higher than 38% of Ukrainian territory. However, today plowlands covers about 54% of Ukraine and 81% of Donetsk region. According to approximate estimates, arable lands around Novoekonomichne also occupy about 81% of locality. Almost total land tillage results in large-scale land degradation, soil erosion, disturbance of hydrologic regime. Plowing up of slopelands is especially dangerous because topsoil is washed off by rainfalls. Eventually, all these processes lead to gradual desertification. It is necessary to understand that desertification is not sand dunes. First of all, it is a thin plant cover or even its absence. It is water deficiency caused by plant cover depletion. The proverb "water is life" is well known. Normal water regime is formed owing to permanent plant cover. All the year round, living and dead steppe plants and soil formed by them acts as a sponge. They retain moisture and influence favorably on microclimate, surface and groundwaters. Arable lands can provide neither the first nor the second effect because they are permanently tilled and stayed semi-bare at the best case. For example, vegetation period of barley is about 2 or 3 months per year, whereas living and diet of steppe flora form favorable environment all the year. Nowadays, rivers of the steppe zone suffer from water deficiency caused by great number of artificial dams and intensive washout of soils from arable lands that lead to silting of riverbeds. As a result of described process, they disappear, but the steppe without rivers is not a steppe, it is a semi-desert or desert. Needs of internal market in such an area of arable lands are absent. Most ploughlands are tilled for export of agricultural products. At first sight, it should provide economic growth of Ukraine, but it doesn't improve welfare of rural people. In this case, the rhetorical question arises: does this make sense? At the end of 20th century, Ukrainian agronomical science elaborated a special land conservation program, which was to withdraw 9 million hectares of eroded arable lands from active tillage and restore natural plant cover there. Most of them were to be transformed into extensive agricultural lands, for example into pastures and hayfields, for contributing development of animal farming. Some area was to be allotted for enlargement of Natural Reserve Fund. At the same time, share out and privatization of agricultural lands started. 275,000 of square kilometers, or 45% of Ukrainian territory, were transferred into private hands. This didn't allow land conservation program to be implemented, because state didn't own these areas anymore. Today, any new plowed hectare is an addition to critical mass of all the disturbed limits of natural environment. Serious damage is caused by afforestation of steppe patches. Considerable part of Karakova grasslands have been exterminated for this reason during the last tens of years. Afforestation of virgin steppes results in their disappearance, especially if alien tree species are planted. This listed to red data book Feather Grass is doomed, because in several years, at the site of steppe biodiversity, the following landscape will take place. These impenetrable jungles are formed by Robinia pseudoacacia. It is an alien species originated from Northern America. In Eastern Europe, Robinia has no any active aboriginal phytophages or diseases that could control its distribution. That is why, in case of its planting on grassland area, steppe species of flora and fauna merely die off there. It is not surprising that Robinia has been listed into the 100 of most dangerous alien species of European Union, but Ukrainian forestry continues its planting until now. Logic of forestry cannot be called eco-friendly and eco-responsible if their lobbyists offer to make the area of forests more than the area of steppes in the steppe zone. All the mentioned above doesn't mean that forest planting is not necessary in the steppe zone. For example, nobody plants new forest shelter belts defending arable lands from wind erosion, or nobody restores old ones anymore. People gradually burn out, cut over, plow up, and eventually bring them to naught. So, planting of aboriginal tree species on arable lands of steppe zone is admissible action on the restricted areas, but the extermination of plots covered with steppe vegetation is not acceptable. However, as a first step, it had better to enlarge area of grassland in the steppe zone, and only after this, afforestation would be relevant there. One more disaster is widespread in Karakova grasslands as well as in Ukraine. It is artificial burning out of dry vegetation. It is a very simple and cynical method of wildlife extermination. There is a mistaken opinion that grass grows better after fire. Indeed, initially burning provokes rapid growth of some plant species. However, water storage is quickly exhausted in soil after fire, and the plants in unburned areas will surpass ones growing on burned-out plots. In nature, plant residues are gradually decomposed and transformed into humus. If during thousands of years dry vegetation wasn't decomposed but burnt every season, fertile black soils would never be formed and only bare clay would be on the land surface. Of course, wildfires emerge in nature but very seldom. Today, almost all the steppe fires are made by people. Burning destroys water regime. Firstly, fire directly dries soil out. Secondly, evaporation of water on burnt area proceeds faster because black surface after fire accumulates solar irradiation intensely. Thirdly, disappearance of vegetation and steppe litter means absence of thermal and moisture insulation that prevents from evaporation. Owing to plants and their residues, the steppe is a steppe, but not a desert. Permanent burnings on one and the same area reduce biodiversity. They destroy a huge number of seeds and injure roots in the top layers of soil. Fire kills a great number of organisms, including pollinators, soil formers, and natural enemies of many insects, causing damage to agriculture. Vegetation serves as a food for many animals, and its burning puts at threat their existence. Many microorganisms involved in humus formation also perish. Considerable part of animal population cannot endure regular burnings out and dies off. Some species, for example Elythrigi repens, are well adapted to fires. Due to creeping rootstocks, it easily survives burning and crowds out other plant species. Usually, Elythrigi begins to grow first after burning. It also extends to arable lands, where its control is made by application of herbicides that aggravates chemical pressure in crop farming. Victims of fire are numerous, but few people get sight of them. It is not a volcanic explosion. There is an ant colony burned together with its residents alive. These helpless wasps have lost their progeny in fire. There is a dead spider which couldn't hide for fire. Thus, permanent burning out of vegetation results in gradual degradation of steppe ecosystems. That is why any artificial fires in one and the same area are very harmful and inadmissible. To avoid environmental collapse, the natural ecosystems should occupy no less than 67% of the terrestrial part of the world with medium global bioproductivity. It means that more than half of terrestrial area must be covered with forest, grasslands, wetlands. Unfortunately, nowadays this figure amounts to 23% only. Thus, humanity has exceeded the utmost limits considerably. Desertification of steppe zone is one of the main threats in the nearest 30 or 40 years. This process has already begun. Its signs are large-scale soil erosion and gradual disappearance of small rivers. The foremost fundamental problem of environment protection is the problem of land shortage for wildlife. That is why its solution requires, first of all, not technological but mental, legislative and administrative decisions. As the first step, it is necessary to save the last wilderness areas for their further transformation into natural reserve fund. As a second step, it is necessary to make legislative and economic conditions for abandonment of eroded croplands. This will enable to make their rewilding and to enlarge area of natural ecosystems. As the third step, it is necessary to return natural streams to rivers, dismantling most artificial dams and ponds. Of course, fulfillment of mentioned measures is very difficult because it requires changes not only in management but also in consumption structure. Without these changes, economic activity causes desertification that will make economy impossible. Every nation, every country, every territorial community is responsible to the whole world for the part of natural heritage which it owns for historical reasons. That is why the prelude to all the mentioned actions is love to the local nature where you live, pay attention to its value, and merely fall in love with it.